This is Access 2019, Module 2, Part 1. We're going to be working in this module on building a database and then defining the table relationships. So in the beginning, we're going to start out by looking at how we can modify the table properties. In Module 1, we created a table in both design view and in datasheet view. So we're going to get back into our Lakewood database. This was used and created in Module 1. You should already have a billing table, a visit table that has data populated in it, and a query, a form, and a report that we created in Module 1. So Module 2, we're going to begin looking at how we can change the properties of our tables. So we're going to begin with the billing table. So go ahead and double click and open your billing table. And we're going to look at ways that we can change some of these properties. So we're going to start out in design view. So we're going to use the view button and switch to design view. When you're working with design view, you always need to select the field in the top portion of the screen before you try to make any changes down here to the field properties. So the first thing is to determine the field you're working with. We're going to look at field invoice number. And then we're going to come down here into the bottom portion of the screen, and we are going to change the length from 255 characters down to 5. The default field size for every short text field is 255 characters. If we know that it's only going to be a 5-character field, then we're storing 250 blanks with every single record we have. So it's always good to shrink that size down. We're going to come down now and change the caption. So what the caption is used for is if you have something in the caption field, it will be used as the column headings in datasheet view. It will be used as the labels, field labels for the forms and reports, and it will be used as your column heading in your queries. So if you want the column heading or those labels to read something other than what is in the field name, you need to enter that information in captions. So for a lot of these, you're going to notice that we'll just simply add the space and make it a little more readable. So we'll say invoice space NUM for invoice number. So when you're ready to switch to the next field, you simply click on the row at the top for that field. So we'll use Visit ID. You can use the F6 key to move down to the Field Properties pane at the bottom. I never do. I usually just come down here and select what I'm trying to change. So we're going to start out making this a field size of 4. And then we're going to go down and locate the caption and add that spacing again. Visit space ID. I do want you to be careful, not just assume that, well, if field size is always going to be the first row and caption is always going to be the 4th row, because the field the options, the property options at the bottom change based on the data type that was selected when we created that field. So for example, when we click on invoice amount now, you can see that size is not even an option. So we have a format of currency. We could change that if we wanted to. We have decimal places set to automatic, which means that if there are no places after the decimal, it's not going to show the decimal places. But if there is, if it's zeros after the decimal, it won't show it. But if it's got numbers after the decimal, they would be displayed. We can come down here and change this to a 2, which means it's always going to be displayed no matter what. Notice also when you get this property update options, you can use this option to update the decimal places anywhere that that field happened to be used. So if you click yes, it would tell you if there were any other fields or other objects, excuse me, that were using this field, and it would make that change on all of them. We're going to come down to the caption and we're going to add the space again. So it's going to be invoice space AMT. Next, we'll change the invoice date. So you can see here that we have, under Format, several choices to choose from. Now, the one thing I do not like about the short date is since they used a 2-digit month and a 2-digit day, what you don't see is that this would actually drop leading zeros in both positions, month and day. So if it were January 1st, 2015, it would read 1/1/2015, not 01/01/2015. But that's not very relevant, or it's not very readily noticed if you're just looking at the options here. You have typed out date options, you have medium date, which puts the date in a different order with the month spelled out. But we can also create custom formats for dates. So in the format box, we're going to type in MM for a 2-digit month. This will force it to be 2 digits for the month, and so it would say 01 instead of 1 /DD. The same way, that will force it to say 01 instead of just 1 /YYYY, meaning we want a 4-digit year. And again, a lot of times when you change some of these settings, you will get this propagating button over here that you can update the field anywhere that it's used. We don't currently have any objects that are using the billing table, so that's not going to update anything. But as you build the database and add more objects, if you go back and change some of these settings, you may need to do that. We're going to then come down and change the caption again to add the space. So invoice space date. And then we're going to finally make changes to our invoice paid field. Now you'll notice for the invoice paid field, it's a yes or no field. We do have a few options, on or off, true or false, yes or no. We obviously can add the caption with the space, so invoice space paid. Now here we can specify the default answer. So if you had Maybe in your practice it was always cash paid in advance, and so it was rare for you to have an unpaid invoice. You can change the default answer to yes, and that way you wouldn't have to check the box every single time. So we can use default values on some of these fields as well. So once we're done changing the settings, we're going to go ahead and save our changes. We do need to use the save button because we have changed the structure of the table by changing these settings. Let's take a quick look at our datasheet view. So we'll switch to datasheet. Notice now when I open it up in datasheet view, I see the captions. I no longer see the field names. So during some of the things that we will be doing later in this chapter or this module, we will be doing some importing. If you get an error message that says a field does not exist, maybe it says visit ID does not exist, and you come in here and you say visit ID is right there. I see it. It's spelled right. You need to make sure you go into design view because what you're looking at is the caption, and it could be spelled correctly here and still have a typing error up here in your field name. So make sure you take that extra step as you're doing the imports. If you see it, get any error messages, you want to make sure you go to the design view and look at the field names. I'm going to go ahead and close our billing table, and we are going to open up, oh no, we're not going to close our billing table, I apologize. We're going to make a few more changes. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add another field. So if we want that field to be added above the invoice paid, we're going to click on invoice paid and come up here in our tools, and we are going to insert a row. That'll move the field down that you have highlighted, and of course any that were below it, and give you a blank row that you can then create a new field. We're going to call this field invoice item. It is going to be short text, so we can leave that exactly the way it is. And then we're going to come down to the bottom pane and we're going to change the length of it to 40 characters. And we're going to enter a caption that puts the space in there. So we're going to say invoice space item. If you should forget to save and you try to close the object and you have changed the structure, it will ask you if you want to save the changes before you close it. So if it does need to save based on something you have done, it will ask you if you forget. All right, now we're going to go ahead and do some changes to our visit table. So let's go ahead and open up the visit table. I want to show you a few things that you can change on the datasheet view here. Right, so we've got our fields. If you look here at the Fields tab, you will notice if we click on the visit date field that it shows us it's a date and time. We have formatting options here. For other types of fields, we have sizes. We can change the name and the caption here. So everything that we can do in design view, you typically can usually find on the ribbon somewhere, but it can be harder to locate. So we're just going to do this as a short date. All right. The next thing we're going to look at is modifying some of the other properties. I prefer to do most of my modifying in design view because then I see everything there. So I'm going to switch into design view. You'll notice you see all the options in one place instead of having to go to a bunch of different buttons to fix them. You can see that it did pull in the short date formatting from the datasheet view change that we made a minute ago. We're going to start with our visit ID. And the first thing we're going to do is add that description that we had before, which was primary key. We're going to change the field size to 4. And we're going to add a caption that's going to add the space. Now we're ready to go down to the patient ID. You will remember in our other table we labeled that second field that's a key in a different table as the foreign key. So this is a foreign key. It is going to be 5 in length. And we're going to add the space in the caption. Next, we're going to go down to the visit date. Now, you don't have to create a caption that simply adds a space. You can put anything you want in there. Says if it's going to read something other than the field name, you can put whatever you want in the caption. So if we wanted it to say date of visit, we could put that in as our caption. Next, we will go to reason. It's going to be 60 in length. And it's going to have a caption that reads reason/diagnosis. And then finally, we're going to go to walk in, and we're going to have a caption that reads walk-in ? And that allows us to make the changes that we need for this table. So we would go ahead and save our changes. You are going to get this message that tells you some of the data may be lost. And the reason you're getting this message is because you shortened the length of your fields and data was already existing in those fields. So for example, if we had a reason that was greater than 60 characters in our table, it would keep the first 60 characters and whatever followed would be lost. And that's what they're talking about when they're saying data may be lost. So we can say yes. And now if we switch to datasheet view, you can see that, again, we see the captions. Now that we changed our captions and we have 2 fields that weren't long enough to display everything, so we can go ahead and enlarge those fields and then save the changes. So we're now ready to continue working with adding additional tables.